Thank you very much for joining me today for the interview. My first question to you, we're going to talk about the first general recommendation of the GREVIO Committee, and it is on the digital dimension of violence against women. And I wanted to ask you, why did the GREVIO Committee decide to publish the first ever general recommendation on this topic?
Thank you, Anna, for the question. We all know that the growing accessibility of the internet and the wide use of ICTs has created enormous opportunities for us, and it has helped us to connect and to get through the COVID-19 pandemic. But we all know there are downsides to the internet too, and one of them is the growing volume of violence against women that is perpetrated online or through technology. So we as GREVIO could not ignore the fact that as the internet use grows, so does violence against women and girls. The increasing need to address all forms of online and tech-facilitated violence against women became even stronger recently as internet usage exponentially increased during lockdown. Online and technology-facilitated violence has spread under the shadow pandemic of violence against women. So we have seen unsolicited pornographic videos that were displayed during online social events. We even heard about Zoom bombings and threats of sexualized violence and harmful sexist content increased. Similarly, for example, in France, doxing-related sexual abuse has multiplied during the COVID-19 lockdown with the production of new type of Snapchat or Telegram accounts, posting young women, sometimes underage, nudes, revealing both their identity and contact information, directing mobs of sexual abusers at them in their local community. So it is important to highlight that the violence we are discussing is only the continuum of offline violence against women and girls, and the physical, sexual, and psychological violence against women that take place offline every day, on the street, at home, at work, is widely amplified, spread, and worsened in the online world and by new technologies. Their root causes are the same, you name it: gender inequality, harmful gender stereotypes, in particular stereotypes around male and female sexuality, misogyny, and the notion of women's inferiority to men. So the nature and extent of the problem reveals that much more needs to be done to address it, by preventing it from happening, by protecting and supporting women and girls who experience it, and by holding perpetrators accountable. And this is where the Istanbul Convention offers huge potential. And for this reason, more than a year ago, we as GREVIO set out our journey to provide guidance to state parties of the Istanbul Convention to respond to the digital dimension of violence against women, taking the convention as its foundation and basis.
Since our members are mainly perpetrator programs, it would be very interesting to hear what three or some of the key points are that the GREVIO Committee thinks that perpetrator programs can take away from the general recommendation.
I think that we all know that Istanbul Convention is the most far-reaching, legally binding instrument to prevent and combat all forms of violence against women. And it does not contain specific provision on the digital perpetration of violence against women, but its very definition of violence against women covers all, and I'm emphasizing all, acts of gender-based violence that result in or are likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological, or economic harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. So all acts of such violence means wherever they are perpetrated. Also, the Convention specifically requires the criminalization of all forms of violence, such as psychological violence, which is Article 33, stalking, Article 34, and sexual harassment, Article 40. The explanatory report of the Convention also said very clearly that, in particular, stalking may include behavior on social media sites and in the virtual world more generally. So our general recommendation, therefore, looks very closely at the behavior to be criminalized or otherwise sanctioned under these three types of offenses. It offers, in relation to each of them, detailed examples of online and tech-facilitated behavior that comes into their remit. Let me start with Article 33, which is psychological violence. It is fundamental importance to our discussion. All forms of online and technology-facilitated violence impact psychologically on victims, so could therefore come under this definition. But another dimension of psychological violence that is exerted by perpetrators in the context of domestic violence. There is also perpetrators of intimate partner violence that use electronic devices and other technology to control, to manipulate, and psychologically abuse their victims. So this is part of the abuse during a relationship, and we have noted during our work that it usually continues after separation. So a recent report that it was commissioned by Women's Aid showed that 45% of domestic violence victims reported experiencing some forms of abuse online during their relationship, and 48% reported experiencing harassment or abuse online from their ex-partners when they had left the relationship. Stalkerware, tracking devices, smart toys for children, or living in a smart home gives abusive partners or ex-partners ample opportunity for psychological abuse or to invoke fear or to locate the victim. Specialist support services for domestic violence victims are spending more and more time and energy on counseling on these aspects of the abuse, and this includes offering technical support to disable spyware or GPS tracker from their clients' devices and to collect evidence for criminal complaints. And very often this time and energy they do not have because of the chronic underfunding of these services and also the ever-changing tactics of domestic abusers. So what it is important to note is that in many countries, expertise among law enforcement agencies around this aspect of intimate partner violence is only slowly, very slowly building up. Stalking, as it is covered by Article 34 of the Convention, may include in its online dimension spying on or contacting the victim on their various social media profiles, stealing their passwords or hacking their devices to gain access to their accounts, installing spyware or geolocalization apps on their devices, or simply stealing them. So last but not least, sexual harassment online also constitutes one of the most prevalent forms of violence against women in the digital sphere and includes a wide range of online behaviors such as any image-based sexual abuse, creep shots, upskirting, deepfakes, forced sexting, sextortion, rape threats, and sexualized bullying. Many women and girls, including very young girls, are exposed to these forms of behavior, and for many, this has far-reaching consequences for their personal and professional lives, doing great harm. The bottom line is that each of us should be aware for these programs, all the counselors, and it doesn't matter if they are working for a perpetrator program or they are working for a victim service provider. First of all, they should be trained on how to know all these terms and how the perpetrators are using them, because which is the rehabilitation process if one perpetrator is saying that he is using spyware and the counselor doesn't know what the spyware is. So first, I think a big effort should be given to the training of all counselors in order to get to know the technology, in order to use it on helping the victims, on helping the perpetrators, on coping and changing their behavior.
How does this general recommendation influence the work done on the ground by organizations fighting gender-based violence? Is there any specific way that they can use it, for example, in their shadow reports?
Mm-hmm. Actually, seeing how much of this online behavior actually comes within the remit of existing definitions of criminal behavior of the Istanbul Convention, Our general recommendation proposes action following the holistic approach of the Convention that are covering all 4 pillars. And given the increase in online sexual violence, such as film rape, commercial entities must be prevented from making profits out of this disturbing practice, including by criminalizing the production and distribution of such content when necessary. How the NGOs enter into that? By being the watchdog for this type of activities. But it also requires, first and foremost, the inclusion of the digital dimension of violence against women into all national strategies, programs, action plans on violence against women, as well as nationwide survey and research initiatives in this domain, human rights institutions, and also state authorities. So when we say human rights institution, this is also part of the work that the NGOs are doing, operating through human rights institution. This and other more detailed proposal, I think that can be found in our general recommendation. And so I just wanted to conclude by saying that it is absolutely an honor for me to interpret this first general recommendation that it was established from GREVIO, and it was totally worked from GREVIO for the WWP members and more. And as a member of GREVIO since day one, now serving as president, I have seen this group of experts and the work on the Istanbul Convention steadily progress. And I am very hopeful that the guidance that we have published on how to apply this important treaty to the vast digital dimension of violence against women and girls will provide policymakers, legislators, government authorities, and especially NGOs and human rights institutions with an impetus to act.